Hey everyone, welcome to the cutout version of the Skyler Sew Along. Today you're going to go ahead and start out with sewing your neckline on your front bodice pieces. You'll take your main and your lining and place them right sides together, and using a stretch stitch, sew along the neckline. Go ahead and clip your curves. Take your back pieces, your main and your lining, and place them right sides together. You will now go ahead and sew along the square opening using a stretch stitch. Be sure you're using a stretch stitch or those will pop and you'll end up with little holes here and there. So once you have your back square sewn, you'll need to cut each point, otherwise it will tug and pull in those areas and it will not look good. So give each one of those little corners a clip at an angle. Once you have your corners and your curves clipped, go ahead and take your front bodice pieces and turn them right sides out. Give it a good shake. You will then take your back bodice piece and turn it right side out by placing your main fabric all in towards the center in the square opening, and shove it through to the other side. And once again, once you kind of get it out of there, a good shake kind of helps put everything into place. Go ahead and grab your bodkin and push all your seams out, and then you can go ahead and press your front and back bodices nice and flat. With your back bodice right sides up, we are going to separate the main and the lining up at the upper neckline. Flip the lining down. You will now have the lining down and the main part up with the seam right there in the center. Take the bottom, both layers, your main and your lining, and tightly roll the fabric up to the center seam of your main and lining fabrics near your neckline. You want the roll to be fairly tight because it is a very tight space to sew in, and you don't want a whole lot of bulk right there. You need to be able to get your seam allowance. So right there, go ahead and roll it right to that center. Now go ahead and take your lining, or take your main, and flip it over to the lining and begin to pin the neckline pieces together. Your main fabric and your lining fabric will be right sides together at this point. And I like to make sure my needle is in there as deep as I can, so that way the seam allowance can be sewn there. The needle kind of holds back that roll. So go ahead and continue pinning. Okay, my neckline is sewn. I used a triple stretch stitch. I'm going to grab my scissors and snip along the curves. This will help make the neckline lay nice and flat without any pulling. Now here comes the fun part. We are going to separate the main and the lining fabrics on one side. And that little roll that you have right there, just kind of pull on it gently. You do not want to pop any stitches while you're doing this, so make sure the bulk is distributed as you're pulling. And this will turn your bodice right side out. How fun is that? So now you have the square is completely encased and your neckline is completely encased. Now let's go ahead and go over to our ironing mat and grab your trusty little bodkin. Push all those seams out. We don't want that knit fabric curling up and getting stuck underneath in there. So push those seams out and give it a good press. Now we have our front and back bodices right sides up. Take your lining and flip it in towards the center so you can see both parts of the shoulder seam, the main and the lining. You'll see the shoulder seams will be in towards the center. Repeat this step with the back bodice, flipping the lining pieces in towards the center. We need our shoulder seams nice and flat so we can sew them together. Once you have that, we're going to go ahead and take our back bodice piece and we're going to flip it directly on top of our front bodice piece, right sides together, matching up our shoulder seams. Go ahead and flip and start aligning your seams. You'll notice that the main fabrics match and the lining fabrics will match up at this point. So grab the seam and make sure it's pinned on pretty even there so you don't have any lining showing on the front or vice versa. Pin both sides. After you're done pinning, we'll go to our sewing machine and stitch the shoulders. You'll stitch the main and the lining on both sides. All right, I have already sewn my shoulder seams now. I want to turn my bodice right side out. I'm just going to grab the back bodice pieces and flip that towards me and take the lining pieces and flip them back towards the armholes. You'll want to push the bulk of the seams right there and push it out, maybe give it a little tug just to make sure it lays nice and flat. Go ahead and give it a good press too while you're at it. If you are doing the tank top version, you will leave the Skyler Sew Along section of our YouTube channel and go to our How to Do the Burrito Method. Super fun. You'll go find that video and continue there. If you're adding sleeves, go ahead and continue on to the next day. Thank you so much for watching the tutorial on the cutout version of the Skyler pattern. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Simple Life Patterns. Thanks for watching.